Welcome to another Quantum Conversation, brought to you by AcousticHealth.com. I'm Loren Gailey, and I invite you to sit back as we enter the quantum realm, that space of the greater part of you. It is your connection to infinite possibilities, infinite potential, and infinite mastery. So welcome to the quantum realm as we meet my next guest. And we are on the walk of mastery. This happens when we choose to align with our divine self. This is the message, primarily one of the many messages of evolvement, soul evolvement, from my next guest as he communicates with his guides on a telepathic level. Paul Selig is here with us today. He is the author of 4 books and also channels information from the masters that he works with. And he is here with us to answer your questions as well as we talk about aligning with our divine self, which actually gives us a quantum leap. Paul Selig, thank you for being here on this quantum conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Your story is amazing. So we're going to give you a moment to tell us about that. You had a spiritual experience in 1987, and this is important because as we go through this shift now in the ages, more people are experiencing similar things. Tell us what happened to you and how this really shifted everything in your life.
Well, I went up to the roof of the building that I was living in at the time in 1987 on the eve of this event that people were calling the harmonic convergence. And people were saying, folks are going to get woken up. And at that moment of my life, I actually had just come from pretty much a whole life of atheism into believing that there was something more. And I went up to the roof of my building with the belief that if one asked to be woken up, why wouldn't it happen? And something, in fact, did happen. And whether or not I was simply hyperventilating and self-induced it, I have no idea. But it was an experience of energy moving through my body, up, and out through the top of my head. It sort of left me frozen there. And people later said it sounded like a spontaneous Kundalini awakening or a Shakti Pa or a soul awakening. I've heard different names. I really don't care, what happened. What happened for me was that I had an experience of something other than I had ever experienced before. And I began seeing, little lights around people shortly thereafter. I had heard a voice about 3 months prior in response to prayer, which was probably the first time I ever really sincerely prayed in my life, or maybe the second, sort of telling me to get my act together, and I had. So I was primed, I think, for the possibility, and I also think that coming from the background that I had, which was, spirituality was something I didn't even think about or understand and had no interest in whatsoever. I didn't know what a spiritual life was, and that was something that could be claimed. I actually kind of entered without a whole lot of baggage. So I guess I asked as an innocent, and I got a response. I'm not saying that it woke me up to the infinite potential of my being. I think what it was sort of a smack on the head in a real way to give me something evidential, which I'm sure that I needed to allow me to go on the journey that I've stayed on ever since. So that was the very beginning, really, that period in 87 of my opening up to the possibility of something more. And I don't know, but perhaps if I hadn't had that experience, I wouldn't have felt quite so called, and I think I did feel called, perhaps as a result of that there was something for me to understand or comprehend or to know in response to what that was.
Yes, it's like you knew that this is truth and you were going for it. Was something going on in your life at that time as you were moving forward with this?
Well, I mean, there was a lot going on, and when I look back on it, it was a bit of a perfect storm. I was about, less than a year out of graduate school at Yale. I had just quit drinking. I had a list of things I had to have achieved in my life that I thought were going to make me okay. And I got the whole list, and none of them made me okay. And I think it was really out of sheer necessity that I began to look for something more, not because I thought that it would be a nice idea. But I also sort of found myself as a 25-year-old gay man in New York City with, waking up to my friends dying all over the place. And I ended up studying a form of energy healing as a way to get a context for not only what I was experiencing, but as a way to be of support to other people. And that's when my abilities really began to accelerate. Once I was sort of willing to be present for the work, I actually found out that I was clairsentient and clairaudient and clairvoyant, which were not things that had been party to my conversation about being in the world. I was a playwright, I was, beginning to work in academia. I mean, frankly, I just left a career in academia that I had for 25 years in order to do this work full time. But at that time, it was a time of great change, and I also want to say a great period of uncertainty in my own world that allowed me to perhaps accept the possibility that the physical realm that I had put so much stock in to sort of make everything okay, suddenly that wasn't going to happen. That wasn't going to happen when, my college friends were dying. That wasn't going to happen when, I realized that my idea of success and what that meant was, I'm not going to say that it was vapid, but it was kind of all equivalent to other people's opinions and had very little to do with my authentic self. And I think that this work in some ways has propelled me there, because it's very hard to do this work and to be, lying to oneself about who one is, or, certainly, investing in stuff that's a little more superficial.
Yes, and so once you were able to put aside that skepticism or, the doubt that this is real, then you were able to see and learn more about it and understand your clairvoyance and your clairaudience. So when you were getting into this healing modality, you began to hear the voices. What was it?
Yeah, I did.
Voices?
I did.
A sense of purity, a sense of love. What allowed you to trust it?
Verification. I'm still skeptical, and I've channeled 4 books now that don't require any editing whatsoever. I sit down, close my eyes, and the dictation happens, but I still question the whole thing. I'm not a very good New Ager, I used to chain smoke and channel, back in the days when I was a smoker. So what began to happen was I studied healing, and I found that if I had my hands on people, I started to hear things for them. And truthfully, it wasn't some kind of angelic voice. It was, all of the chatter that I had going on in my head, which was exceedingly loud, would suddenly be pierced by a thought that wasn't my own. And I knew it wasn't my own because it wasn't anything that I would have been thinking about. So if I had my hand on your chest and I heard the name Harry, and I don't know a Harry, I learned to say, who's Harry? And you'd say, my father, my son, my lover, my boss, and that would prompt a release. And I started to feel empathically what was going on in other people's bodies, which shocked me. But again, it was the verification of it that allowed me to believe it. So if I was in my office and somebody was coming to see me and suddenly my stomach would go crazy and I'd run to the restroom, and then the client shows up 3 minutes later with irritable bowel syndrome, I kind of learned to make the connections that I was actually picking up on other people's stuff. And that, again, was physical phenomena. So the clairaudience was something real enough to me that I learned to repeat it and say, does this mean anything to you? And the physical stuff was fascinating to me because it was never mine. I mean, I remember once I had a woman on the table who had a very, very large chest, and the whole time I was working on her, I had this cutting sensation across my back, and I'd never felt anything like it, and I didn't know what was going on. And when she got off the table, she said, "Oh my God, my bra's so tight." And I went, "Oh, that's what that was, you know." So, you know, now in my practice, because I don't do hands-on healing work anymore, occasionally in the workshops that I lead, I'll do that work. But a lot of what I do now is as a clairsentient, where I'm actually just sort of able to step into people, and, you know, sometimes I'll start to resemble, you know, them. If you ask about your sister and you give me her name, I can step in. Sometimes I'll start to look like her, take on her demeanor, and tell you what I'm hearing. So the beginning of that happened at that time, but frankly, none of it came because I was looking for it. I wasn't asking to develop it. I just wanted to be good at what I was doing. And any of the psychic work that I've done, all of it, in fact, all of it, hasn't come because I thought it would be nice to develop. Like, I didn't even really believe in channeling that much. The fact that I'm a channel is a head scratcher to me, and if I think too hard about it, I'd probably never do it again. But it all came because somebody needed something, and this was a way to be in support of what was needed.
Yes, that's beautiful. Well, thank you for allowing this to come forth, because as you've witnessed yourself, it's good information with people. And even in your books, oh my goodness, when we check out your book, your latest book, the Book of Mastery, literally in the first chapter, I have every other paragraph underlined. It really is mastery teachings on how we can fully be in alignment. So this is what you're doing now. You're bringing forth the guides, your guides, that allow you to step into someone, and you do this over video live stream, which is very cool, because then people can see you as you take on the characteristics of these beings that you're giving messages for. And so in our session today, we can hopefully experience a little bit of that with some of our callers. What can, when we work with our audience, what would you like them to ask you, or what's a good protocol about that?
Well, I think if they have questions about the teachings, that's always good. You know, I'm not a spiritual teacher. I don't claim that. I'm not a guru. I don't want to be. I'm the guy that sits in the chair. I actually don't even write the books. I'm just taking the dictation. But I've learned how to explain them, and sometimes when I can't, the guides will. You know, if we go into the psychic realm with some of the questions, I'm okay with that, but primarily I work with the living. I'm not the one to say, you know, to give you the messages from your aunt who's crossed over. I can tune into your aunt, but I'll actually hear her as she was when she was here, sometimes as she was crossing, and only if she wants to will I bring through messages. But really, I've been called a medium for the living, and it's an odd ability, but, you know, I'm a radio. That's how I describe myself. So if I'm tuning into my guides, I'm playing their broadcast. If I tune into you, I'm hearing your broadcast. And if I tune into the people that you ask about, I'm tuning into them as they relate to you. So I could perhaps do some of that. You know, my guides have been known to say, when I've done occasionally a book signing or something, and somebody say, well, your guides come through, and they've come through to say, we are not the entertainment. And then that's it for them. You know, they're here, they're teachers. They're here to teach. They're not here to give the lucky numbers or to sort of speak about the events of the day. They're really, I have to say, kind of amazingly consistent in what they bring through and what their teachings are, and those continue to build as the books continue to come forth.
It's so wonderful that you can just write these books and allow this information to come out. And when you channel them, yes, these teachings do come out. So what would you say from Paul's perception of the words? You said they are consistent with their teachings, but this is soul evolution.
It is soul evolution. I think that's not a term that they've used. They use evolution a lot. They haven't used that term. And they actually, I think in many ways, avoid terms that have sort of been appropriated culturally. Like sometimes, the guides will see, somebody will say, well, what about soul contracts? And that's Carolyn Mace's teaching, I think. But, they don't speak to that, but they have their own language for what they render. I think the important thing about what they do, or one of the important things, and all of the books are operating this way, the guides say the books themselves are energetic transmissions that are working directly on the reader. So the books themselves are actually attunements to the frequency that the guides are working with. So if you go and you look at the reviews on Amazon, you'll often see things like, I'm reading the book and my body's vibrating. I'm reading the book. I'm seeing auras. There's phenomena that comes. But the language that they work with the attunements, is very specific and is there to sort of support us. They say that it's encoded. It's there to really support us in actually sort of being able to tune our own energetic bodies, or the radios that we are, to play the higher broadcast that they say is always playing. It's not that it's not there. We just haven't been listening to it. It's already present. We have to align ourselves to that reality that's here even when we don't see it.
That's the important part, even when we don't see it. Okay. Well, thank you for that. Let's talk a little bit about some of the teachings. When we talk about aligning with the divine self. In fact, we have a couple questions from our audience already. Please show us or tell us how we do align with our divine self. This is really embodying divinity. And again, we said earlier, this is how things go quantum in our lives.
Yeah. Well, how do we do it? That's what the books are doing. They're really working with us to do that. Now, the first book that was channeled through me was called I Am the Word, and there is an attunement in that word which the guides that I work with are calling it the teaching of embodiment, or the attunement of embodiment. And it's a very simple one, truthfully, and they use the word, it seems to me that they're sort of reappropriating language that has been used historically in different ways. So, for example, when they use the word Christ, which is a word that they use interchangeably with some other words, their definition of it is the aspect of the Creator that can be realized in material form. And their definition of the word has been the energy of the Creator in action. And they would probably add as you are. So the attunement in I Am the Word is a very simple one. And I'll give you what the language of it is. You say, I am word through my body, word I am word. I am word through my vibration, word I am word. I am word through my knowing of myself as word, word I am word. And that's the first attunement. Now, it sounds just like words, and it is just words, but when you work with it, there's actually an energetic response. And when the guides do these, in the live streams or in workshops, they actually get people working with the energy. You can send it, you can receive it. It'll actually work with you in your field. Now, how does one align to their true self? By claiming it. So my guides actually just piped in and they just said, by claiming it as so, it is true. They're saying it is the truth of who you are, even when you don't know it, through the aspiration. The aspiration, in some ways, to be the divine self, they're saying to be the divine self is negation of it, is a negation of it, because already what you are, because it is already what you are in higher vibration and higher vibration. So aligning is not seeking, it's about accepting. It's about accepting what already is, and things to be known as you. And they say seeks to be known as you, and they underline the word as. So they often have said things like, the divine as and through, not as a separate idea, but as who and what we really are. I mean, they're talking a lot these days in their teachings, and I think this is where they're going in the next book, only because they announced in a workshop in Des Moines, Iowa, about a week ago, that the next title of the next book was The Book of Truth. and I'm supposed to begin dictation this coming week. And they've never given me a title like that in a public situation, say this is what it's going to be. But what they've been saying for a long time is, truth is eternal, and the truth of who each one of us is, regardless if we want to accept it or agree to it, is always as an aspect of the divine. Everybody is, even the people we can't stand. It's still who they are. So this convenience of spirituality, like I'm going to be, this is what they would say, and it's funny teaching, like, they've said, like, you don't become the Christ becomes you. You don't decide to be your higher self today. The higher self is as you. The small self, or the egoic structure, the personality self, kind of wants to do all these things on her terms or his terms, which is usually to conform to an idea of what it's supposed to be or look like. Like it's all supposed to be rainbows and pretty. And what the guides are sort of teaching is something I think quite different, that this is who we are anyway, and who everybody is anyway, and the alignment to that, the being of that in an awareness of truth, the truth of who you are, the truth of who everyone is actually what claims the divine into manifestation. You're witnessing the divine, and by bringing that awareness of truth, you're calling the truth into being. It's already there, you see, but we're only perceiving it as we're stuck in the illusion, and we're missing what's fully present in all things. That's the best I can say it.
Okay. So beautiful, beautiful words there. And the divine truly does manifest in us, through us, when we put our awareness on it. And I love what you said there. Claim it as so. Your guides have said, claim it as so. And they also say, claim the kingdom. And when we speak of New Earth and creating our reality, claiming the kingdom, that there is more to be said there. This is with sheer confidence and not scared to stand our truth.
Well, their teaching of the kingdom is a big one and increasingly important. They introduced it, I think, in the third book, but they've been known to introduce a concept and then expound on it like 2 books later, or even 3 books later. I'm kind of surprised that they seed the teachings in preparation for something that will later be expounded upon. But the teaching of the kingdom and their definition of the kingdom is the awareness of the Creator in all manifestation. They say is the truth of what is. And they say that the small self, or the personality structure, can't enter into the kingdom because he or she doesn't exist at that level. At that, I would offer the word dimensional frequency. The small self is operating, as the guides have said many times, and they've said it to me, and I think it's one of the very first things they ever said to me, way back when I was first opening up, is, the small self operates in a small kingdom, where he's running the show or she needs to get her needs met, and everything's about how it's supposed to be, according to, frankly, an inherited agenda. We grew up, we're told what to want. Everything in the room that I'm sitting in right now has a name to it, and that's a name that was given to it by somebody who came before me. And we're all in agreement with what we've inherited in the physical realm. Now, the true self, or the divine self, exists in a higher way and, is the one who can bear witness, they would say, to the kingdom. But they say you really can't do that as long as you're excluding people from it. So, one of their consistent teachings has been you can't be the light and hold anyone else in darkness, because first it's just hypocrisy, but it's also, again, convenient, So the agenda for being able to operate at that level of consciousness seems to be somewhat contingent on one's willingness to release the attachment to what we think is there or should be there, or what we've been taught, in order to be able to know a higher level of truth.
Thank you. So then let's talk a little bit about what the guides have to say about unity consciousness. This is something that we must look forward to. We should contemplate solutions from this perspective. Yet, as you were just saying, this programming that we've got programs us into judgment and competition and so many other things. So can you share more on how we can really create unity consciousness?
Well, I think there's a whole chapter on unity, maybe in the last book, or that's titled Unity. I don't know if they've ever talked about it as a field or as unity consciousness. But I think what they do say is that our belief that we're separate from our source, from the source of who and what we are, has actually manifested in our belief in our separation from everyone else. So, it's sort of a symptom of this belief that we're not of source. So I don't know, how do we get to unity consciousness? I'm going to see if I can get an answer by trusting the possibility of it. The first thing they're saying is by trusting the possibility of it. Can't be. If you don't trust the possibility, it can be and will not be, because you won't align to it. They're saying the second thing is to believe that you're allowed, is to believe that you are allowed to know the self in this way. They're saying to know the self in this way, to believe that you're allowed to. They're saying if you believe that you're allowed to know yourself in this way, you can claim it as what you can have. You can claim it as what you can have, but you've been prohibited. They're saying, but you've been prohibited by an agreement to know the self-separation. They're saying to know the self in separation, know your fellows in that way. They're saying and know your fellows in the same way. If you wish to persist in this, you may, but the dividend you pay, and what you release is the awareness of the unity that's already present. That's already present, period. And they're saying period. And I should say, because I'm channeling, when I do that, is when I channel, I whisper the words as they come and repeat them. So if you're hearing a whisper, that's just the process of my bringing the transmission through. It's not the most elegant way to work. It's just how it comes through me. And, when I channel directly without the whisper, it's usually in a great big booming voice, and you'd be turning the volume down. And it usually only happens when the energy is at a very high pitch, which is not necessarily when I'm in conversation as well and they're piping in. When I'm really... I've always said that, the process of channeling for me, the first step is sort of I'm handing the wheel of the car over and I'm allowing my consciousness to recede a bit. But when I'm really out, which is I'm mostly, pretty out for the books, I'm climbing into the back seat of the car and reading a magazine. Sometimes when I'm worried about the quality of transmission or the information I feel could be questioned, I will question, and that's the equivalent of my leaning over the front seat of the car and saying, hey, what are you talking about? This doesn't make sense to me. And then they actually have to explain it or unpack the teaching in a way that allows me to be able to move forward without resistance.
Fascinating, because here you are just letting this information pour through you, and it feels and seems as if it's effortless for you. You don't have to worry. You said that you don't even have to edit these books as they come out. That's fascinating.
I can't. Well, it's the rule here, The rule from the very first book was that if it came out of my mouth, it was in the book. It wouldn't be a channeled book if I got to go in there and pretty it up. It might be an inspired text. There's nothing wrong with inspiration, but I do make the distinction with what I do. Because I can be in alignment and speak as Paul, and I know this, and I can be operating at a much higher level than I often do in my conversations when I'm really tuned in. And I can do that without channeling, but when I'm channeling, I'm allowing Paul to recede, and I'm allowing this other consciousness, whatever it may be, to come forward. And the agreement has been that it's unedited. So in the very first book, there's a woman who's been on the telephone for all of these books, sort of being the active listener for the sessions, because the books themselves are just the transcriptions of the verbal channelings. Occasionally she would ask something about her personal life, and she said, can that not be in the book? And we edited that because it really wasn't pertinent to the teaching. And since then, occasionally something will happen, like somebody will bang on the door while I'm channeling and throw me out of my body, and I'll curse a blue streak. And that'll show up in the book as interruption. which is usually like Paul cursing or Paul's having a bit of a meltdown because he's freaking out that the teaching doesn't make sense. And it's even in the new book, the guides say, like at one point, Paul, just take a walk around the block and we'll speak to Victoria, who's the woman on the telephone, Victoria Nelson. But this is just sort of how it comes. So, yeah, unedited has been the key, and that's how it's been, and I trust how it will continue.
Well, you said trust there, and that's another big teaching of the masters. Primarily, trust yourself.
Well, trust what aspect of the self? Do you know what I mean? I can trust the part of me that doesn't trust other people and proclaim the untrustworthiness of the world, or I can trust the aspect of Paul, or the truth of who I am, which doesn't operate in fear and consequently doesn't believe that everybody's out to get him. Do you know what I mean? So, the self, the interesting thing about the self, somebody once said, I think the guides might have said, we don't write self-help books. And I think the response was, whether it was from them or somebody else's, because, self-help books are for the small self. It's the personality trying to improve the personality, whereas the divine self, the truth of who we are, is actually operating outside of those parameters and rules, and I think is seeking to be expressed in is who and what we are. So it's a re-identification. It's not just. So I would just say, to sum that up, which self would always be the answer.
Which self? Well, I would think that we would trust our highest aspect.
I would too. Yes.
Instead, we tend to focus so much on the worries and believe so much in the worries. Rather, if we can trust this higher aspect and more of the information that comes to us, like the information from your guides, that then assists us so much more.
Yeah, when I was channeling Book of Mastery, which was really this time last year, was when it was being dictated, I was being challenged by a number of areas in my life, and really one after the other, to the point where I just went like, this is persecution, this is getting ridiculous. Every aspect of my life is being challenged right now, or taken away, or reshaped without my consent, at a personality level. And, one of the teachings that came through at that time, it was a very specific teaching, and it came right at the moment when I needed to hear it. They said, the true self, or the divine self, cannot be persecuted. It's just not possible. And the true self does not know fear, because he or she doesn't operate at that level of functioning. It's a different level of being. So, for me, sort of getting thrown back to this part of who I am, in the face of what my small self would do, which would be, run for the hills or start a fight or seek to protect everything and become defensive, was part of my passage here. And I'm not saying that I'm ascended or I'm aligned. I'm learning through this. But I do understand that the being of the true self is about not operating from my smaller self's agenda of what I think should be, because that's stuff that's usually just sort of stuff, you know what I mean? It's like what I think I'm supposed to want because it's what I was taught people should want, which is the challenge that I think my guides sometimes have with some teachings, which seem to be a lot about getting things, like how to manifest a better apartment or a more handsome partner or something like that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having a nice place to live, and to be partnered with somebody that you desire. But, the guides have said things like, there's nothing wrong with the house on the hills. Somebody gets to live there. But why do you want it? And if you want it because you think you're going to be the envy of your neighbors, or you think that that's going to make you a more worthy human being, you're actually manifesting in fear, and you're actually sort of aligning to a whole collective agreement and limitation, that they're hoping, I think, to move us beyond.
Well, thank you. What do you think they have to say about the vibration of the true self, this divine self? It's always there.
Yep.
It's always around us.
Yep.
And just consciously being aware and choosing to connect to it, Share a little bit more on this.
Well, it's a teaching that's at the end of the Book of Mastery, and it surprised me. It really surprised me. Towards the end of the book, they say, okay, so the aspects of your life that really aren't working or stuck, where you feel will never change. The guide said, to the reader, write them down. And then they said, and then give them to us, hand them over to us. And I objected to that teaching at the time it was coming through because I said, well, that sounds like enabling or magic, and please don't mislead us, was my sense. And their response was really simple. They said, we exist in truth. That's who and what we are. And everything that you've written down on the page is a lie because it's not who you truly are. And so when you give a lie to the truth, the lie no longer exists. Truth cannot hold a lie at a vibrational level. So what they're saying now is that in alignment to truth, what we believe ourselves to be that is not true no longer exists. Now, I channel workshops almost every weekend now, somewhere or another, and the guides prepare me for the books by beginning to deliver the new teachings in these situations, and I think partially to get me comfortable with the concepts, because then I'm interrupting less, I'm in less resistance, and usually they'll only give me the initial ideas until I'm stuck taking the dictation. I can't really stop because I've agreed to do it. But they've talked about it almost as if it's a chord being played in resonance. And when you're playing truth, that when that's the note that's plucked on the harp string, as they've said, what is not in truth does not exist. You're really moving into a whole other level of agreement. So this is the teachings that are just beginning to come through now, and that's about as much as I know about it because, I've only gotten glimpses of it in live streams and workshops in the last few months.
Yes, and so one question from our audience at this moment is, how do we call in our truth? And I guess we would say that our experience becomes our truth. What do you have to say about this?
Well, I think the experience is the reflection of the vibration, and a reflection of consciousness. So claim it. Again, I hear claim it, operate as truth. They're saying operate as truth, and they underline the word as. Know who you are and what you are in truth. Know who you are and what you are in truth. That's sensible stuff. And they're saying, and that is not as the small self who wants to get her way, has an agenda for how things should be or be prescribed or be prescribed to be the true self. The true self knows who she is, knows who she is, because she cannot be other than that, because she cannot be other than that. Know who you are in truth. Know who you are in truth, and your landscape and your landscape begins to reflect it, because that is what you are in accord with, period. And they're saying period. So, I don't know that it's a magic word, but I do think it's an intention. It is an intention, and they're really talking about this as a note that can be played. So in the third book, there was another attunement, and this may help the one who asked the question. There's another claim of truth. They call these things claims of truth because, as opposed to affirmations or mantras, because they say, a claim of truth is always true. And the claim of truth in the third book, and which they echo in the Book of Mastery in a different way, is, I know who I am, I know what I am, I know how I serve. Now, when they say that it's the divine self or the true self who's speaking these words, not the small self who just wants to run and get dinner or is worried about being late for an appointment, but the true self. I know who I am as an aspect of the divine. I know what I am in this manifestation, in this form, in this life. I know how I serve, and the guides would say, how each of us serves is how we're most fully and truly expressed as our true self. That's our innate expression is as service when we're operating at that level. We cannot not be of service. So I know who I am, I know what I am, I know how I serve. And they say that when you claim this, you're actually aligning to it. So when they say know who you are in truth, I think this is what they're referencing. You are an aspect of the divine. You're not your last relationship. You're not what you see in the mirror on a superficial level. You're not what your parents said about you. You're not your last job evaluation. You know, you're not what your culture has decided you were by reason of birth or economics or whatever. All of that stuff is frankly not the truth of who we are. There are ways that we may be expressed and we may know ourselves through these things, but the truth of who we are finally is unchangeable. It's the divine self, and that's the aspect of the self that is in truth because it can't lie. You know, God within, or whatever you want to call that, can't lie. It doesn't exist at that level. My guides have said there is never a lie that's been told, and even the smallest lie they would include in this, that has not been told in fear. And the action of fear is to create more fear. So if I want to believe I'm a piece of crap, I can do that. It's a lie. You know what I mean? Even if that's what my world says that I am. And as I affirm that lie, I call other lies into being that will collude with it. And my world then reflects this belief in a limited self. Now, I'm not saying I'm there yet, but I do understand what they mean, which is a challenge because it defies, at least for me, who I was taught to be and how I am still taught to be in the world.
Mm-hmm. It's quite freeing and liberating. And when you read that attunement or experience it, you can clearly understand how it's an energetic transmission. Mm-hmm. And also, another thing that I found very powerful in these teachings is there was a phrase, I have a right to be here, in one of these attunements or claims of truth. And that, at the moment, was very powerful. We can see how all of the old programming, with just that one statement, can really do a lot of liberation for that person.
Yeah. When they do workshops, you know, they do some sort of eye work or have people looking at one another. But, you know, one of the things that the guides have been known to say to everybody, and often when they're being witnessed by somebody else, they're saying, you know, see the one before you. She was born. He was born. He has the right to be here. We were born. We already have the ticket. We have the right to be here. You know, and on a very, very basic level, you know, from many of us, myself included, who can operate from a place of low self-worth or low self-esteem, you know, the belief that we could be worthy of a relationship with the divine self or God or whatever you want to call God is challenging. You know, the Book of Knowing and Worth, which was the third book, really was about sort of reclaiming our birthright. You know, we're an aspect of this, and what they're trying to give us back is our true inheritance. It's not about being a good boy or being a good girl and trying to earn it. It's about claiming who the hell we've always been and getting on with the process of being it. And frankly, not at the cost of our humanity and our messiness. You know, we're here to learn and experience and to demonstrate, I think, the amazing potential that we all really have, you know. So, you know, I don't know if it's ever a graceful process. Perhaps it is for some people. My growth has been clumsy at times and tragic, I've thought, you know. But you know what? We still show up because we're still here. You know, it's still happening, like it or not. It doesn't go away.
Yeah, so have fun with it. And, you know, once we move through it, I find that sometimes I'm just laughing now at some of these old thought paradigms, right? And so it's fun to laugh as we let it go and really embrace the divinity and align with the divine self and be more of it and reclaim our birthright. Yeah. So thank you. We're going to go to some questions on the phone. First, I want to take a quick moment and allow you some time to share more on your beautiful special offer. It does involve your next series of live streaming events where people can ask you questions themselves personally, plus they get to see you on video. That's right?
Well, my guides are lecturing on Wednesday nights, and on Wednesday nights there's a live stream, and they're about an hour and 15 minutes long, and my guides bring through a teaching at every one. So I'm channeling, and then, for the last half hour or 40 minutes or so, they'll take questions. And, sometimes they're questions about the teaching. They're often about people are able to ask about their lives and the issues that are coming up that pertain to their work and their growth and how they're trying to apply this stuff or how it's impossible to apply or whatever. So that's ongoing. And, if people are unable to join us at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, we actually are able to send you the video and the audio together or separate or however you want it, so that you can listen to it at your leisure. But this has been the platform for the teachings in a sequential sort of forward way. I did a group in my apartment for maybe 18 years. People would put $10 in the basket. I'd channel. It was the laboratory for the guides and their teachings. Mm-hmm. And what began to happen was there were just too many people wanting to come or call in on the phone, and so this is now the laboratory for the teaching. So yes, we'd love it if you'd come, and the information on the live stream. I think it's Dominion, a workshop in mastery is the title of the new workshop, and I don't know where they're going to take us with it because everyone is different, and every week they bring through something new.
Yeah, wonderful teachings. So that is available in your special offer. Scroll down on this webpage and you'll see a link to that. And also what I love about it is this comes with transcripts. You've got some other live stream events that you have gotten some transcripts for, and that's really wonderful because, again, the energetic transmissions, just by reading this really helps to unravel those thought processes and programs.
Yeah, I don't know that we're including all transcripts because sometimes the guides dictate portions of their books in the live stream, and then those things can't be published prior to the book coming out. But I think we're doing our best to make what we can available to people. And in the last live stream, actually this time last year, not the last live stream, but this time last year, Book of Mastery, I think there were 4 lectures that they did in the live streams that ended up, they said, this is going to be in the book, so I never know until they do that. So that's exciting as well.
Wonderful. Okay. And then there's some other bonuses that come along with that, and we can let our readers and listeners check that out on the special offer link. Thank you for that special offer. It is wonderful to have access to these teachings in depth like this. Okay, let's go to our phone line. If callers are on the phone and you've got a question for Paul, you can hit *2. Questions on humanity and where we're going are most welcome because it affects the group as a whole. And otherwise, if you need to go with a personal question, let's do that as quick as we can. So we're going to go to Rock Island, Illinois, and the last numbers of the phone number are 9588. Hello, you're unmuted. Do you have a question for Paul?
Hi, yes. The question that thank you very much. This is all really good information. But the question that I have, and I apologize, there's was how do you ask yourself what you need to work on?
Well, my sense of this, and it's a very strong sense, is it's already present in your life. What I need to work on usually is what's in my face and causing me some challenges. I mean, our lives are the best classroom that we have. They're the opportunities to learn. So it's rarely convenient, I'll say that for me. It's really what I want to take on. Like, I'd like to go learn French. Why not? And that would be fun. What I really need to do is work on where I undermine my own health, in my life, because when I look in the mirror, I'm challenged by the areas in which I do it. So, that's how I would say that. I'm going to ask the guides this only because it's an interesting question, by knowing what you need. They're saying by knowing what you need. That's the only answer. And they're saying that's the only answer, you're knowing what you need. Knowing what you need and where you're not being met. And where you're not being met in your need is what you require to learn through, is what you require to learn through. So you bring to you the lessons that you need to develop, that you need to develop what you perceive as lack. And what you perceive as lack in any area of your life, in any area of your life, is simply an opportunity, to know truth, to know truth. When you know truth, there is no lack. There is no lack, because truth is not lack. Because truth is not lack, it is abundance and source. They're saying it is abundance and source, period. And they're saying period. I've never heard that before, but that's what they say.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right.
Yes, thank you. Wow, when you know truth, there is no lack. Beautiful, beautiful words of wisdom. Thank you. Okay, let's go to our next caller, and this looks like Maria in San Fernando. Hello, Maria, you're unmuted.
Hi, Lauren. Hi.
Hi.
My challenge is, how do you accept what is while okay, that is going to sound strange, but you're not happy with the circumstance, but you know that you have to accept it. Will the acceptance of the situation allow it to change anyway?
They're saying you can't change anything until you accept what it is, was the perception ending. So it is the first step in changing anything we deny truth. We don't ask you to deny truth or what you see in the mirror or what you see in the mirror. We ask you to know higher truth. We ask you to know a higher truth and claim it as what you are, and claim it as what you are. How do you accept yourself? How do you accept yourself when you don't want to? When you don't want to is the real question. We would like to answer that. We would like to answer that by knowing who you are. By knowing who you are beyond the perception of limitation, by knowing what you are, by knowing what you are as an aspect of the Creator, as an aspect of the Creator, first and foremost, the life that you live. The life that you live is agreed upon by you, like it or not. Like it or not, it's an energetic accord. It is in energetic accord with you because you can perceive it, because you can perceive it, because you are claiming it, because you are claiming it in tandem as part of your field, Now, as you know yourself in a higher way. Now, as you know yourself in a higher way, the claim changes. The claim changes in what you call to yourself, and what you call to yourself must be of higher accord to the truth of what you claim. So the truth of what you claim is always in resonance with what you think you are, with what you think you are, what you think you can have, and what you think you can have because you've accepted it as such, because you have accepted it as such, period. And they're saying, period, say this, please. And they're saying to me to say this, please. So, I get what they're saying, and it's a challenging teaching for me. But one of the things that they've said again and again, is that we're actually, if we can see it, if I can see it, I'm not separate from it. If it's in my landscape, I've got a relationship to it. It can be anything or anyone, anything in the world. And the good news is, if I can perceive it, I can actually transform my relationship to it and support whatever the thing is itself in changing. But I don't do this as the sort of small self who has an investment in how it should be. The divine self knows truth and operates from a different, how can I say this? We'll say it perspective. They're saying perspective, period. And they're saying period. So I hope that made sense to you.
Yes, because so we can transform it when we transform our knowing of ourselves.
Exactly right, because it won't be changed. Okay. It won't be changed by the small self. The small self actually is the one who's invested it, who's already in agreement with it. It's actually, this is what the guides say, and it's a really interesting teaching, and it's, they say that we're always operating with a frame, and a frame, they say, is like the picture frame that we hold up, that we see the world through. And if my frame says I'm never going to get a partner and I'm going to be single my whole life, my world is going to sort of call right back to me what I'm affirming. So, and the funny thing about this is it means that we're like always right. So the woman who says, I always date jerks, each time she dates another jerk, she gets to pat herself on the back and say, you see, I always date jerks. So the frame itself, which is the small self's, way of identifying in the world, is actually serving as a precursor for what we say that we want, but in fact we're usually getting exactly what we expect in one way or another. So the small self, I believe, and I get told this by my friends all the time, the small self doesn't fix the small self. It just doesn't work that way.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Maria. All right, beautiful. Let's go to Franny on our webcast, who has a question. How long do you wait for others to wake up around you before just moving on? Sometimes we must release and let go, but we don't always know when to release and move on.
Well, the guys are saying you're assuming that they should be woken up when you think they should, and that's the only problem here. And that's the only problem here. You can't dictate another's growth. You can't dictate another's growth, nor should you want to, nor should you want to in the prescriptive nature. And the prescriptive nature of the questions of the question itself, they should be doing what I want. They should be doing what I want so I can make my decision. So I can make my decision. What we like to attend to is what we would like to attend to. When something is no longer in resonance with you, you always have an opportunity to move from it. You always have an opportunity to move from it by not making it wrong. Now, say this differently, hear this differently, by not making it wrong. They're saying by not making it wrong, but allowing it to be what it is, but by allowing it to be what it is when you move away from someone. When you move away from someone, be very clear that you're doing this for intention, that you're doing this through intention, to be in truth and not pretending to have moved beyond them, to have moved beyond them in some way or another. Many people believe that what enlightenment looks like, that what enlightenment looks like is a shared construct of ideals. And in that case, it is actually not the case. Truth as we say it, may manifest in different ways, and each one of you come, like it or not, to know yourselves through the landscapes you inherit, through the landscapes that you inherit and claim and recreate yourselves through, So if one is not doing what you want, so if one is not doing what you want, the highest thing to do is to know who they are, is to know who they are, know the divine truth in them, know the divine truth in them, regardless of what they do, regardless of what they do. This will actually lift them. This will actually lift them to their truth, and you can decide how you want to be. And then you can decide how you want to be or not to be in relation to them, period. And they're saying period. So that's what I hear.
Beautiful. Great wisdom. All right, thank you. Marty has a question. Any insights for someone, me, who has been told for years that I am clairvoyant, clairsentient, clairaudient, and very intuitive? While seemingly having many friends, I have never felt like I belong. I have done much spiritual work and clearings. I feel blocked and so want to break through. Yes, and I know Marty's not the only person with this question.
Well, I don't know if I fully understand the question. Is the question how to break through to one's awareness of one's own abilities, or how to break through spiritually? Because they can be two very different things. They're pointing at Marty, so I'm going to tune into Marty to do this, and this will be specific to Marty. Now, I usually do this with a whole name because it allows me sort of very singular specificity, but I think I can do it just with, my guys are just writing out the names, so they're fine with it. I'm going to tune into Marty. Marty is going around saying, but I don't get it. And he's announcing that he doesn't get it to his whole world, and his whole world is affirming that he doesn't get it. His experience is affirming what he's claiming. I'm allowed to have it. I am allowed to have it. Underline this. underline this. I'm allowed to have this. I am allowed to have this. We'll get it for you. We'll get it for you if you don't think you're allowed it. If you don't think you're allowed, it will not be given to you. It will not be given to you. And if in fact it is, and if in fact it is, you will not take it. You will not take it because you can't be in accord with it, because you can't be in accord with it. And they're saying, do you understand? Change your mind. Change your mind. Know yourself. Know yourself as worthy of what you say you want, and stop affirming the negative. And they're saying, and stop affirming the negative. Say this, yes. They're asking me to say this, yes. I can speak to this actually because, even though the first sort of ability that showed itself was not a skill. It was just something I was seeing lights around people, and these orbs would show up sometimes. And it was fascinating to me, but I wasn't getting clairvoyant information. And I had friends that were psychics, and this is really before I had a practice as a psychic. I was channeling, who used to say, oh, I see you at a kitchen table with a man with sideburns and, a beret. And I'd say, well, I don't access information that way. I hear and I feel. And I actually one day decided to go on. It's a longer story, but the short end is I actually had to pick a screen name to read online, and the only name that I could use that was free that day happened to be Second Sight. And I was like, oh, God, I don't want to use that name. Everybody's going to say, Second Sight, what do you see? And I don't see. But I claimed the name, and the first person came on and said, Second Sight, what do you see? And as I was typing, I don't see, I was seeing in Technicolor right away. And I was telling people what they were wearing on the other end of the computer. I was telling people the cracks in the basement of the houses they were about to buy and the scarf the realtor was wearing. I was having a field day. I was so excited. You couldn't get me offline for 2 months. I loved it. But, the funny thing is, I think the difference was I claimed it. I claimed the name, and in doing that, I aligned to it. And I stopped affirming for a moment that this was not something that I could do. I also realized in retrospect that I had probably been doing it for a long time, but assumed it was something different. So in my workshops, the guides actually teach clairsentience, how to feel energy and how to send it and all of that stuff. And it's not uncommon for people to really open up in a large way. But I think what they're opening up to is what's already been present that they've sort of been in denial of. Now, I will say, that I think we all have this innate ability, but I think we probably have it in degrees. I mean, I was never terribly athletic, so I can still run around the block, but I'm not going to get a medal for it, So there's different ways that people have access to their own knowing. I think one of the great gifts and great spiritual gifts, truthfully, is the gift of knowing, which is just really being in truth. Because when you're knowing, you're in truth, and when you know, you're always compelled to act in the highest way.
Maybe you could give us some information on really what it feels like, or feeling and attuning to that knowingness.
Sure.
When we look at the problems in the world, we're always told to go within and correct that within. And this knowingness within, that is a vibration.
Well, it's a simple exercise. If the guides do it, I can do it now. I can just do it as myself. So, I mean, and I do this in workshops sometimes. If you just, if everybody listening wants to just go to a time in their lives, in their memory, when they knew something. I knew I got the job. I knew I was in love. I knew the relationship was over. I knew fill in the blank. A time in your life when you knew. And go to that in your body and just feel what it was like to know. And kind of anchor into that, let that sort of become a chord that you can remember in resonance. And now let's go to thinking. So I know what Paul's going to say. I think I know what Paul's going to say next. I think I know what's for dinner. I think I know what my boss really thinks about me. And see if you can notice the difference between thinking and knowing, because there's usually a very distinct difference. And what I've come to realize is that when I'm in my knowing, there is never a question attached. There's a certainty in truth. In truth, I'll say that word again. When I'm thinking, there's always a question. I think I know what's for dinner. I think I know what my boss thinks. I think that this relationship is going to last. I may want it to, but it's very different than being in knowing. And also, most people sort of describe this as thinking being up in the head and then knowing being more in the body or in the heart. But this is a simple way to begin to learn how to access one's knowing. And, we all have, I think, responses to something. Like, when somebody doesn't like you. They don't have to say anything. You know how you stand at your job most of the time by how other people are interacting with you. You know when a relationship is working or not working. So you have to begin to trust your own innate ability to know what you already know and then build upon that. And also not be coerced into believing that because somebody else says that something is true, it's true. Because it's often somebody else's opinion, or what they're trying to foist upon you to get you to go into an agreement with them. My guides are really clear about free will, like they don't override free will. They really don't even tell me what to do. I've often said, if I want to walk into traffic, they'll let me. But if I say, is this a good time to go into the traffic, they'll say, not wise, which again leaves the decision to me to learn, So when you're in your own knowing, you're in your own authority, which is a wonderful place to be.
Your own authority, true sovereignty. And I love what you said there, too, about asking. That is a crucial step in this communication, is that you are asking for it. You're asking for the information.
I think asking is a good thing. Asking sometimes needs to precede claiming, People often say, how do I get in touch with my guides? I say, ask them. Ask for help. I also believe, though, and the guides teach this. They say, we're always ordering off the menu of what we think we're allowed to have. So, for example, if knowing isn't on the menu and I believe that I have to defer to everybody else's opinion, that's going to be my reality until I believe that I can have my own menu. My own knowing. The menu that we have is what we're ordering our life from. And most everything that's on that menu is what somebody else told us we were allowed. If we want something more than that, we're going to have to get a bigger menu, It's just that, and that includes these things for many of us.
Okay, good words. And I also just love claiming brings it into alignment, what is already there. Yes, beautiful wisdom. Okay, a few more callers before we say goodbye this evening. Let's go to, it looks like Gulf, Ontario, and the last numbers of the phone number are 1406. Hello, you're unmuted. What's your name, please?
Oh, hi, my name is Karen. Thank you for taking my call, Loren. I just knew in that second it was me. And it was such a wonderful feeling. Thank you. How does, you're saying we all have that ability and to have these gifts. And how, other than having to ask, I find that we're always asking someone else to enlighten as to what our gifts are.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem to be something that we trust unless we hear it from someone else.
Well, that's the problem with a lot of religious teachings, you've got to get it through the rabbi or the shaman or the oracle or the priest. It's all, there needs to be an intermediary. They're pointing at you. Can I have your first name again, please? Just
yes.
What
My
is
name
it again,
is
please?
Karen. My name is Karen.
Kim? Okay. Let me
Karen.
see if I can get you. Karen.
Karen.
Well, this is you. I tune into you, and you're pointing at everything like all at once as if you don't even know. And then there's all this anxiety around it. It's funny, like oh my God, what's mine? What's mine? What's mine? So it kind of feels overwhelming, and then you end up pushing it all away. So even though it's there, you have to let it come to you. You kind of got to let the stuff come to you. I mean, I don't want to suggest that everybody, should be putting on a shingle as a psychic, but I think that everybody does have intuitive ability, and we're all able to feel energy. Nobody can convince me otherwise. I do workshops all over the place. Usually the people that really can't feel energy, I've experienced, are people that grew up in a home where it wasn't safe to feel. And the moment that we're able to move that energy, they're super, super sensitive. It's kind of amazing to me. And some of the most sensitive people I've met are the ones that are the most protected, because they don't want to be overwhelmed. I mean, from my own experience, anything that anybody could do to dim or to numb their abilities, I've managed to do. Whether it be cigarettes, alcohol, food, which is still the on and off issue, anything that I could do to sort of protect myself from my sensitivity, I've managed to do. And it's frankly, when I started to let go of those things, that my abilities kicked in. When I quit smoking maybe 11 years ago now, and I was able to do this stuff prior, it's like I got shot out of a rocket. But in retrospect, I was smoking so much that my central nervous system was probably always just in trauma. And I was always detoxing from the chemicals, Once those were there, I was kind of a bit of a raw nerve. But that's what allowed me to do what I do, to the extent that I'm able to. My channeling completely changed, and that's when dictation started to come through, and I was less buffered, by my need to stay safe. So trust. The guides are saying to you, trust. Let yourself have what you can have. Let yourself have what you can have. It's how it should look. And don't decide how it should look because you limit it, because you will limit it, period. And they're saying period. So that's what I get.
Wow, Paul, that is beautiful. In a lot of what you said, I received intuitive information also, so I do appreciate that. Thank you. God bless you both.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks so much for sharing. Okay, that's fascinating. Let's go on to Flagstaff, Arizona. The last numbers of the phone number are 7072. Hi, you're unmuted. What's your name, please?
Yes, it's Katia.
Katia?
Hello. Yes. And I would like to ask something about me, but I think I feel more in my heart now to ask about my son, Christopher. If that's something that you're able to do, tune into him. He's 17 years old, and he's doing drugs and maybe mental illness of some type, depression. And I'm just wondering if you have anything you can tap into him.
I mean, I'll do this. I always say I don't do medical readings, but I do feel people. And I usually work with a full name, but I think I can get him through you. So it would be Christopher, and your name is Katya. So they're actually pointing to you first. I've got to go to you before I go to him.
Of course.
So
that's fine. Yes.
You actually come through your arms are kind of waving, kind of house on fire waving, like oh my God, like the house is burning down, like oh my God, oh my God. So that's how you come through. I'm going to go from you to him. You're doing that to him as if to rouse him, as if to literally pull him by the back of the neck to pull him out of the burning building. I mean, this is really where you're at. Let me go to Christopher for a second.
Okay.
He actually comes through saying, you can't make me change. And there's a level of defiance here right now. I literally feel like I'm in my bed with an army blanket wrapped around me, like smoking a cigarette while the house is going to go up. And he doesn't want, right now I get him not wanting to move. So let me see what may support him in this.
Okay, that's what I need to
This guy has to be supported by others, isn't a choice. Right now I don't know that this is his choice to be moving beyond this, but he's worthy of the help. He's actually worthy of the help, and he will get it. I believe he will get it. I'm going to ask what you need to do for him specifically. Get up off your ass. Essentially, I hear get up off your ass and get out of the bed. You've got to do it. Now, why? Let me just see if that's not what's happening here. She's more than my only concern here is that you may have invested a little bit in the drama around this, and the enormity of the drama than the simple action that needs to be taken. And this feels to me like it's about this is what needs to happen now, like really direct. And I will say this because I'm a believer in it, but, you know, I'm a believer in 12-step programs, and Al-Anon is a very good place to get support if you have a loved one who's being challenged by addiction.
Okay. Yeah, when my husband is doing that with him. So, you know, so we have different ways that we see things.
Sure.
But, so I'm just wondering, I just wanted to hear something, so how can I help the situation, you know, because I feel like in between them.
It feels to be directive. Now, I didn't go to your husband here, and that's a whole other dynamic if I go to him.
Yeah.
I can. Can I have his first name, please?
Fernando.
Well, he comes through, I got to say this, he comes through with the middle finger up and extended to everybody, which is usually, it doesn't mean, it looks like it means screw you, but usually what it means is a boundary. It's a symbol that I get all the time, like nobody gets to cross unless I say so. It's a way of being in charge.
Exactly. Yes.
And what he actually does is he takes his son under his arm firmly, as if to claim them as like-minded or alike. So he's actually sort of holding firm. I'm assuming this is the son and not you. Let me go from him to you.
Yes. Okay.
A lot of talk, and recrimination, finger wagging, which is part of the reason I think you're going up into a bit of the fear, which makes some sense now. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So this is the fire. This is the fire that the metaphorical fire, because there is no fire. Okay? But that's how I understand
it. Yes, I felt that. Okay. Well, thank you. And
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Good luck with him and yourself. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks for calling. Wow, it's incredible to watch you, Paul. It's pretty fun. So, gosh, do we have time?
I do.
There's more callers and questions than we can possibly get to. Do we have time for 2 more callers?
I'm okay.
Okay. Let's go to Barbara. It looks like Barbara in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. 2663 is the last numbers of the phone number. Hi, Barbara.
Hi, Loren and Paul. Bless you both.
Thank you.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. You answered my burning question for today, Paul. Part of it, anyway. For the past couple of years, I've been bringing to me as part of my lesson victimhood, and thought that I was doing a really, really great job at looking at it and asking it, what do you have, what do you have to show me? What do you have to teach me? And so it's pretty amazing. I was dealing with a victim situation revolving money. I was totally the innocent party, but there were 2 other parties, kind of in the middle. There was a mistake made. One party said, well, we're going to charge you more money. The mistake was the other party, and the other party said, well, I claim no responsibility. It's on you. And so it was a perfect scenario, actually, for me. And so the way I handled it was, I spoke with the one party. Well, I spoke with the one party and basically was like, well, what kind of world do we want to create now? We're creating a world, but I think it wasn't so much telling them, but telling myself, proclaiming who I am and kind of what you were saying, know who you are in truth. And I think that that's what I was doing, and verbalizing it. And so it's kind of unusual for me to verbalize it. And so what ended up happening just today, so the one party said, okay, well, we'll minimize the cost to you. And the other party said, no, still not going to claim responsibility. And then today, out of nowhere, the other party just called and said, no, we're going to dissolve it all. You have no responsibility in this, and you don't owe anything. And I thought, and I just thought, what happened? What happened? What happened? But I think you answered it, didn't you? That it had to be because I knew myself in truth. Is that what happened?
Yes. I mean, essentially, they're saying tell her this, but I'm not even hearing what they want to say. She knew it was so. She knew it because it was so, and because she didn't operate as she had. And because she didn't operate as she had, the outcome was different. The outcome was different. The outcome affirmed her teaching. The outcome affirmed her teaching. She is not a victim. She is not a victim, and she never was. And she never was. So in truth, she claimed it. So in truth, she claimed it, and her life reflected it, and her life reflected it. That's as it should be. That's as it should be, period. I hear period. So yes. And then,
oh my gosh, thank you. And actually, yes, I thought that today. I thought I had something to do with that. My standing and my truth had something to do with the outcome, though it was amazing. But then the second part now is, here's the question that I'm not sure of. So this is so wonderful that I get to ask this, is the woman who was claiming no responsibility, who is actually the person who made the mistake. What the question that I was getting, this is what made me understand her, was that to me, she felt like a bully. And so in questioning further, the answers that I got was that she's the victim. She's the victim now being the bully. And this is the way she is dealing with her victim. So it makes perfect sense that we would be working this out together. And so my question now is, she doesn't know that the other party has let it go, because she has said, oh, well, I'm going to go to the nth degree to make sure you pay this. And so she doesn't know that I've been relieved of the and so do I have,
Hey, I'm just going to step in because there's a lot of narrative here, and there's a lot of pieces to the story. So I just want to tune into you by name. Just your first name again?
Is Barbara.
Okay, I'm going to go to you first. Well, you see, you're pointing to yourself as if you're looking, you're demanding that your life affirm you. But I do want to say, some of this is as you think it should be, and some of it is as you truly are. And this is just because you're learning. The name of the woman who doesn't want to forgive anything, just her first name, please.
Alice.
Let me see if I can get her. Well, the funny thing is she's doing the same thing. She's affirming herself and taking a bow. So as long as everybody has to be right at the cost of somebody else being wrong, nothing gets to change. Now, the funny thing is everybody in a weird way can also be right in their own way. So let me just ask what you need to do with her. Bless her, let her be. This is what I hear about Alice. Bless her and let her be. She is not your problem. She is not your problem unless you want her to be, and then you'll claim the problem, and then you'll claim the problem, period, period, period. I'm just saying period, period, period. Okay?
That's the answer I needed to know, and that is so funny because I basically, yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yay. We had a shift. Thank you. Wonderful. Okay. And, if we have someone on our webcast for our last question tonight. It's Jennifer in Phoenix, who feels like her deceased father has something important to tell her, but it's just not coming through clearly. Is it possible, Paul, that you can tell her what this is? Do you need his name? I don't have it at the moment.
I don't get a yes to this, truthfully. I'm not getting that this is something that wants to come through right now.
Okay.
Let me go to her name first.
Jennifer?
Let me just go to Jennifer. Oh, I need what I want. Well, there's a sense of I need what I want. Now, I'll go to the father dynamic, but I don't consider myself a spiritual medium that I'm not bringing messages through. It happens only when they really want to come through. Just give me the father's first name, please. Can I get that from you?
Paul, I don't.
You can? Okay. All right. Let me see if I can get it through Jennifer any way it's possible. Well, the energy around the father is actually fairly directive and prescriptive, and actually in a little bit of a befuddled way, but I've got him as he was here. So I should say this. So very often, when I say I don't do people that have crossed, if somebody comes to me and they've got an issue, say around an issue in their life, and my guides say it's father, I'll go to the father. And I'll go to the father usually as he was, start to resemble them and move into the dynamic to try to move the pattern. And if the father in spirit, if he's crossed, wants to come through, he may make himself known and explain it. It happened in a workshop in Toronto a couple of weeks ago where a woman who the guides said, asked this woman what happened when she was at such and such an age, and she knew exactly what it was around this pattern. And then I heard a male voice next to me saying, "What a jerk." And my guides don't say "what a jerk," but I said it, and she said, "Oh my God, that's what he called himself, around this issue." And so that was the verification that she needed, that he was there in spirit. But my work primarily is to support people in moving through what they've created. Let me see if the guides want to say anything to her. Say thank you to her father for being there with her. I just hear say thank you to your father for being there with you. You'll get the answer yourself, and you will get the answer yourself. We trust in this. We trust in this, as you should as well. I'm surprised I hear the word should, but that's what I heard. It's not a normal word. Okay?
So helpful, Paul. Thank you so much for this.
You're
and
welcome.
As we say goodbye, we would have one last question on behalf of all of those listening who want to know this as well. Can we take dictation from our own guides like you?
The big question, the big answer to that, frankly, is why would you want to? That's a head scratcher for me. I mean, I don't think being a stenographer is a very sexy profession, and that's really what I do. I'm sitting there in a chair, like reading ticker tape, audio ticker tape, So, I think the guides even say, why would you want to be who you are? They're saying be who you are and luxuriate in that expression.
Wow.
And luxuriate in that expression. Be demonstrated fully in all ways as your true self. And be demonstrated fully in all ways as your true self, and you will have the answers you seek. Then you will have the answers you seek in all ways as well, period. Missing period.
Yes. Thank you, too, for listening and sharing in this space today. We leave you now with music from the universe, literally sacred geometry of music, as musical notes were assigned to mathematical equations. The result is this beautiful music, available at acoustichealth.com.